Hey, it's Curly, and it's been exactly 1 week today since Divine Set 2 has released over in Japan. So today I wanted to take a look at the Week 1 decks that Japan is playing for this format. So we're on the Dexander site here. We're going to go ahead and click on this and go to set 2 here. We'll zoom in a little bit there. There is definitely going to be some more lists and information coming to the site, because usually there is, you know, a nice little graph and all this other jazz. But it's still pretty early. So we'll take a look and see what it is that Japan has currently been playing in this short amount of time that they've had so far. The big thing we're expecting to see here is probably a lot of Bladmire being played, but there's a lot of other really cool stuff that's out there right now. Like there's the new Flame G Girls, interested to see if that has seen any use. Maybe Rotovisor, maybe I'm totally wrong about that. Rotovisor is extremely good. There's also a lot of interesting things like the order that is in Dragon Empire that allows anytime the Vanguard restands, it gives 10k to the front rows. A lot of stuff like that. It's pretty interesting. So we're starting off with that in Dragon Empire here. We'll see that right now. We have ourselves 2 Overlords here, single buff Saga listing, and a couple of Varga lists as well. Varga did manage to get himself a grade 1 that allows it to on place turn off intercepts, and also I believe it retires itself to draw 1 card. We'll see if that actually sees any play. So we got ourselves the first list here, which is for Overlord. It is a little bit hard to see because it is kind of small and I just have zoomed in a lot on. But as you can see here, we've got the order in play here. Whenever that's played and your Vanguard restands, you give the front row 10k power. I believe that's till the end of the turn, so this can activate multiple times. Other than that, it's pretty much standard fare from Overlord. See here, they're using the energy cycler to discard, which makes a lot of sense because you don't use energy for anything else in this deck. And of course, they have for themselves the Angel Ladder for the Shiranui matchup, and you know, just anything else that can do any sort of control or removal. And then of course, the Order Cycler here unit, which can, you know, allow you to discard 1 card, and then you can go ahead and choose an order from your deck, put it into your drop, and you can activate it from your drop until the end of that turn. So I kind of really like this list. This is a bit of an interesting one here with the Lafayette here. This is the Cycler from set 11 that says whenever you play an order, you Soul Blast 1, look at the top 5, call something out. So that allows you to get access to quite a lot of things in your deck, like of course your Burning Horns, and then of course this dragon here, I forgot his name, but the one that allows you to retire itself to put a Overlord into your soul, specifically the older Overlord. So that does allow you to be a lot more consistent with your plays. I just don't know how often you're going to be able to use her, especially since you only have grade 3 orders, but hey, pretty interesting. After that, we've got ourselves another list here for Overlord, and it's more or less about the same. More copies of the grade 1 is what I was expecting to see, and I think that's a good play for the most part. They're actually playing less copies of the grade 2. I don't know how I feel about that, and they're also using this energy, this order that uses energy in order to, based on the number of empty rearguard circles your opponent has, you look at that number of cards from the top of your deck, call up to 1 card, great den or less equal to your Vanguard. But it's the same general game plan here, mainly trying to make use of this order here to get some big, hefty front rows. Then we got ourselves a 1-buff Saga list, but Saga didn't really actually get anything directly in this set. The only thing she got was the Cindy, which was a promo, which helps the deck out quite a bit, but other than that, it's generally your standard buff Saga affair. Next up, we have the Varga list here, which is pretty standard for the most part. They're still playing this interesting combination of both of these cyclers, both the ones that Energy Blast and Soul Blast in order to draw a card on ride. I don't really feel like it's super necessary. I feel like you can use that space in the deck a lot more efficiently, but we see a lot of that being run here and a lot of the usual stuff. It's kind of hard to see, but we got 4 copies of the grade 1 actually being run here, and also the grade 2, which I didn't think would actually see a lot of play, but we're actually seeing that there. Likewise, we've got this list here, which also is playing 4 of the new grade 1. It kind of makes sense. I believe there was enough space in the deck to just throw that in there. We also see the Drag Connect order here as well. Varga can restand, so it can actually proc the order, as well as the Order Cycler as well, and using the Regalius here to actually get more Persona Ride, and also just have another order that you can play. Then, this is what I was hoping to see here. So we've got ourselves a Varga list that's actually using the Virginia ride line here, the Varjuria ride line, which makes a lot of sense. Not to say that the ride line for Varga was bad, but this ride line is pretty good and pretty free and allows you to be pretty aggressive in the early game. This list does run the Med Hat as well as the Varga Grade 1, so they do have that ability to be able to be aggressive early game, make use of this guy's skill. He gets 2k for each of your rears. We do see the Grade 2 being run here, but I don't believe I see any of the new Grade 1. Just one single copy. Interesting. So that does it for Dragon Empire. Then we can go on, take a look at Keter Santuary. Not too much here, but as you'd expect, we've got Liel and Raziel. So Raziel got a lot of good stuff coming out of this set. Mainly this guy here that's only being run at 2 copies, which is pretty interesting. I feel like that's an instant 4 of, because it allows you to get soul, it allows you to, I believe you draw a card as well, and it allows you to look at the top card of your deck, put it on the top and bottom. It also gets 10k power when it's called out by your Vanguard's ability, so just an instant 4 of in my opinion here. This list is kind of interesting as they're playing stuff like the Maple here, 2 copies of the Spiral Cutie, 1 copy of the Girl That Binds Herself if it's a 5th battle, only 2 of the Counter Charger. They've got the Order package here. It's definitely interesting to say the least. The next list here is omitting their triggers, which I guess is fine, but it's also running the Order package here as well, including the dog. We've got the Cycler, we got 4 of the new Grade 2. To be honest, Raziel at this point kind of builds itself. Then we've got ourselves the newest deck from this set in Liel. So Liel, unfortunately, most people build it exactly the same as Raziel, typically with the Order package. We don't entirely see that here. We do see the dog run here at 4 copies, which is not much of a shock. But we do see the Grade 3 for the deck being run at 4 copies. That just says whenever you have something in Bind Zone, this gets 10k, I believe. And then also 4 copies of the Sejas. I feel it's a bit much to have that many Grade 3s. You do want to have, max playsets of stuff because you have to bind something and then call something with the same name. So having the max amount of something in a deck allows you to be able to do that. But I do feel that's a bit much. I like this Grade 3, but I would rather run one or the other. Personally, I don't know if I would go for both of them. I'll probably be able to end up running this, maybe at like 2 copies and maybe this as well, because you don't always need to call this guy out. You're better off calling this guy out as your main target from the Liel skill, who just says on attack, counterblast, bind, call something with the same name from deck. And then there's also a Grade 2 that came out in this set that says whenever it's placed from deck, it gets plus 10k, so that's a nice backup that I would use instead of running for 8 Grade 3s like this. That does it for Keter Sanctuary. Then we're going to go into Brandt Gate here, which is up next. Not too much here of either, similar to before. First things first, we got ourselves Orpheus, who managed to get himself 2 cards. There's a promo that came out that's pretty decent, and then a card that just restands. I do not see the restander here, but we do see 4 copies of the promo. I believe it gets 5k shield and allows you to look at the top 3, 4, or top 7, I think it is, for any Grade 3 or a world card and add it to your hand. It might be when it boosts, I don't exactly recall. Other than that, everything is pretty standard or fair here. Hopefully this helps the deck out so the deck becomes a lot playable. The deck kind of totally fell off as soon as set 13 came out. It was good in set 12 and then people just stopped playing it for whatever reason. Next up, we got another Orpheus list. It's about the same as the previous one. The only difference might be the orders. I didn't really take a look at the specific ratios, but in general, nothing too crazy here. And then lastly, we've got ourselves Eva. Again, last Brandt Gate deck. No Rotovisor showing, which unfortunately I'm not too surprised. I'm pretty sure, for the most part, it's not going to show up aside from maybe later on in, for Dexander's sake at the very least, until later on so someone gives it a shot. I don't expect the deck to do very well. Unfortunately, it needs a little bit more support. But we do see Eva here, who managed to get, again, her Grade 1 promo support card again. So it's just like that previous year of set 6 all over again. I believe that was the first year of Overdress. And we've got ourselves this Grade 1 that says, I believe in drop, it can Energy Blast through to call itself out. And then it can also ride skip into the Poison in Paradise Eva, which is what's been being, played here. I've been seeing this guy run a lot, which is kind of cute. I don't I don't really like them too much, but I totally get it. They've switched over to also using the monster PGs because of the fact that this guy's a monster. They can play this. Some lists have also seen play Bombermine, but they also end up using this because this is also a research order, and it actually allows you to get your, thin out your deck, add pieces to hand because you can look at top 5, add a monster to your hand. Also, I believe 1 to hand, 1 to drop. So it does allow you to thin out your deck, and you can get this guy in drop, easily call him out, add this guy back to hand. And, they play the monster PGs because it allows them to search it out because it's technically a monster. We also have the return of the Combine Rusher, which literally does the same thing as this guy, so you can call stuff back from drop. So now the deck can actually have some very easy recursion. And of course, everything else is relatively standard. They've gone back to the fronts, at least this build specifically, for the deck. And they're actually playing, I've seen a lot less copies of this promo run, sometimes even 2 copies, because you don't need it as much. You really just need like 1 copy to stay there to protect your Obfuscades. You don't need it to countercharge as much because the Poison in Paradise Eva doesn't actually use Counterblast for her abilities, if I remember correctly. It's just kind of free. Which is one of the biggest plus for this, so you don't have to worry about Counterblast as much, especially since really it's just going to be based on Combine Rusher. If you're not on this Eva, right, if you're not on her, the only way you use your Counterblast is really just on Combine Rusher, and that's about it. And since this guy can call himself out, it's, kind of don't need it. Alright, and then finally, finally get to Dark States here. We have a Chaos that did not share their list, and then we have a bunch of Bladmires to look at. We'll take a look at the Alma Jester list first. So here is the Astroya, Unica, Baiko, Mask, etc. list. So, it uses a lot of the newer support cards that the deck has gotten. We have the Phone Opera Star or whatever. We have the Bifrons, which is one of the best cards in Dark States right now. Actual Swirler in that it's actually generic and useful in a lot of decks. We got ourselves the promo card here, which helps you, look at top 7, add either the Mask or, one of your Persona rides or your Mask copy. Or the Order into your hand, so it searches out a good chunk of your deck. We got the new Order Cycler that easily puts the, the Mask into drop, so then you can just activate it, as well as any of your other cards, such as this dumb Order here that tries to make the Mask version essentially become the original version, because they realize that version is actually way better than the Mask version. Other than that, this is rather standard. Playing the blue OT, which is kind of interesting. I always liked using the Dark States OT because it makes this attack a lot more threatening, but since you can consistently get the crit, it's probably a bit of an overkill. And then also seeing the new Grade 2 being played, which is actually a pretty good card. I believe it discards 1, look at top 2, add 1 to hand, put 1 into soul, or something like that. So it's similar to the Chaos Grade 2, so it's pretty good. And of course we got ourselves the Man of the Hour here, Bladmire. Since it dropped, since the reveal, it's just been, this is going to be the next strongest thing, the next top tier 0 deck, and it from my understanding has been doing just fine. I think part of the reason is that a lot of players are still stuck on this mindset that you have to play Swirler and Expeller because they saw it played in the anime and they want to do a sort of more OTK build where essentially they think that using the Bladmire Divine Skill, you want to have it as big as possible since your opponent cannot PG, so you use the Swirler to pump him up so that all your attacks are essentially unguardable and you can push hopefully 4 damage that turn. I feel like that's way too inconsistent. There's just so much more you can do with the deck, especially considering that you have this ride line that allows you to very easily thin out your deck. Keep your triggers in your deck. I don't know why you would then want to then put those triggers into your soul with something like a Swirler, especially considering that this deck doesn't natively soul charge, right? This does not soul charge, this does not soul charge. The grade 2, which I think is this, does not soul charge, this does not soul charge, so it doesn't really it's not really worth it. The Expeller, I also think it's overkill, but it makes a little bit more sense than the Swirler in my opinion. Expeller, when it goes to soul, you can soul blast him out by counterblasting 1, give your Vanguard plus 10k, and then you soul charge 1. So that powers up your Swirler a little bit, powers up your Vanguard, it gives you this giant column, but you don't really want a big column of Swirler and the Vanguard. You want it with this grade 1 here, the Invoke Alchemist, because it allows you to restand one of your units, and I would much rather spend my Counterblast on this and these guys than on Expeller, to be honest. But that's sort of generally how the list goes. It's kind of just 4 of all the support cards, and then you have a couple of spaces that people fill up with the Swirler and the Expeller. The Laminia is as it should be. You don't really want to use the energy cycle. You want to save all your energy for your grade 2 here, who says Energy Blast 3 in order to get a crit in 5k. So you always want to use your energy on that instead. And then we got the last card that was revealed for him, which just has that funny effect where if you use your Divine skill, I believe you either put it to soul or retire it, and then it forces your opponent to discard a card at the beginning of their next ride phase. So it possibly hurts your opponent if they only have like one card in hand, or they have useful cards, but it's supposed to make it harder for them to ride into Persona Ride copy of their Vanguard, so that they can then get over the skill of the Divine skill. Next up, we've got another Bladmire list. This one's a bit more difficult to tell what's going on here, but we got ourselves Laminia, we got ourselves the Maid. This is very similar to the list that I would be running. We got ourselves the Maid promo that just says she attacks if your opponent is grade 3 or greater. You can choose a card from your drop, put into Soul, and she gets 5k for each grade, so she becomes pretty big. She works out extremely well with this grade 3 for Bladmire, which just says whenever it goes to Soul, it binds itself face down to draw your card. So you can very easily give your Maid plus 15, then also power up your Bladmire and draw your card, so it's pretty nuts. The Cage of Souls is great because you can always get good stuff into your soul with your ride line and pull it out. So this is definitely more of the list that I would play. The only difference is that I haven't used this guy yet. I believe they're running 4 copies of the one that makes your opponent discard. When I was testing Bladmire, he hadn't come out yet. So essentially my list is this, except I have like essentially 4 Bifrons, which just allows you to get more hand value and more specific cards in the soul. They're using here fronts also, which is kind of interesting. I was playing draws a bit, and then I switched over to fronts. I'm not sure which one's the best because you don't plus insanely much. You plus from like Bladmire's skill, the ride line can let you draw. This can let you draw for Counterblast 1 if you choose 2 cards, or I think just 1 card. So you do plus a bit, but nothing too crazy. And I figured I would try out the draws, but you can also possibly deck out if the game goes too long. Got ourselves another Bladmire list, kind of the usual affair here. We got the Expellers, there's the Swirlers, there's the Order Cycler, which is kind of interesting because they're trying to use this for the Cage of Souls, which is, I guess, that could work. And 4 copies of the Energy Cycler, which I don't know if that really works out well in this deck. Next up here is definitely like the stereotypical Bladmire list, because as I mentioned, you don't really soul charge a lot in this deck. So what they do is that they'll play the Brainwash Swirler since it doesn't soul charge. They'll then try and add in copies of Pandemonium Tactics, which then means Counterblast 1 to soul charge 4, which does mean that you Counterblast 1, you instantly get 4 soul to use for the Bladmire skill. But there's so many better ways to do that in my opinion, especially without having to pay Counterblast, without having to randomly soul charge. So this is more of like an OTK version of the deck. They also have the Bifrons here, so it is that. They're also playing all of the stand heals, which is interesting. They're playing the blue over trigger and also draw triggers, so it's definitely a lot more of an aggressive build because you have to get a lot more pieces specifically, so it makes the deck even more piece reliant. Personally, I do not like it, but that's just me. We got ourselves one last list here, which is kind of interesting because they got the Steam Clean Dragon, which is interesting because it's if you Persona Ride Counterblast 1, choose either your opponent's or your rear guards up to 3, put them to soul. This gets 5k for each, so it's good removal. It gives you a strong attacker if you need that. Not a bad option. It's a bit Counterblast heavy, and it's only useful on turn 4 because you have the Persona Ride. But, it does give you the removal option. But they also have the Swirler. This, of course, does not activate Swirler because it's not Soul Charge. But, interesting. So that does it for Dark States. We'll go over to Stoichia, which really doesn't have too much, and I believe that's kind of it. Lyrical has a Fennel list I guess we can take a look at, but other than that, there is nothing else going on here. We got MyGo, but MyGo really doesn't change at all considering their card pool. So we got one Leonard list. This is kind of interesting here. They're using the Aurora here for the tokens. They got 1 copy of the cat. I like that a lot. Like me some cats in the deck. I got 3 Diantha, 1 copy of the Resonance Dragon, 4 copies of the discard to Soul Blast to draw Margaret, and then 4 copies of the Energy Blast one, which is kind of interesting. 4 copies of the Luster Impact here, and then I'm not entirely sure what this is here. And then we got ourselves 4 copies of the Rosarium Fairy, 4 copies of the Vivance as well. This is pure events, no mask. Definitely a rather interesting list, to say the least. Then we got ourselves our first Zorga list here. Zorga's been going through some pretty interesting developments, because there's, like, as per usual, there's been a million different ways to play Zorga, and that just continues to evolve over time. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it. This is using the new ride line. Some players are using the old ride line still. Some players have decided to take out Roaming Prison Dragon, which is what I believe I'm seeing here, which is interesting because they instead rely on the new Grade 2, which sort of does the same thing as Roaming Prison Dragon, but not exactly. There's a lot of players, specifically in Japan, that are also using the Rogue Headhunter, because he says on place, I believe it is, it might be continuous, but I'm pretty sure it's on place, your first, use of Counterblast through Alchemagic is reduced by 1, so that they can then use it with this order here. No, not that one. I think it's this one here that you can't really see. That says Counterblast 4 to draw 2 cards, but for every card that is bound, this reduces its Counterblast by 1. So the trick with this is to get a bunch of cards bound in combination with Zorga Nadir's skill, who I believe it's I forget how. I think it's whenever you Alchemagic you bind it, when you Alchemagic you bind, you use something in bind zone. I think it's you Energy Blast 2 to call stuff and then you bind in order. But I also know that this binds in order as well. So you use stuff like that. You have this card here that I believe it's like Counterblast 1. Bind itself and then choose 2 orders from your drop to add to your hand, so that way you are able to have orders for next turn, and then you have something that's already bound. And use all that to just be able to constantly use this Pot of Greed that you then bind, and then all your orders that are in your bind zone, you can constantly access them with your Alchemagic, as long as you have another order in your hand to Alchemagic with it. That's the general game plan. We also see some decks that don't, or some Zorga builds that don't use the Philander anymore, because Philander is a very interesting card when it comes to Zorga. It allows you to on place from hand only. Look at the top 5, put a card from your drop, which works really well in getting your Roaming Prison Dragons and your Karmas out from the deck. But also, if you have 10 or more cards in drop, it gets plus 10k power. At the same time, Zorga's skill calls something from drop. You can't keep using Philander, so you might be better off using something else. So it's a bit of an interesting little development there to see whether or not they're going to play it or not. It is using the Roaming Prison Dragon, only had 3 copies, which sounds fair, and then only 2 copies of the Karma here, playing the Shadow Cloak as well, and then we're playing this thing, whose name escapes me at the moment, but I think if it boosts and it hits, you can actually either bind in order or choose one from bind and add. I'm pretty sure you bind in order to choose one from drop to add to your hand or something of that sort, but I just remember testing this to use it to get more orders into bind, which is not half bad. I believe this girl, she's one of those new cards that every other new bosses gets, the main anime bosses get, that if you boost the Vanguard, it gets plus 2k, and if you have a specific Vanguard, it gets plus 5k, and then if you boost the Vanguard specifically, she has an extra skill where I think she retires herself to choose a unit and give it power, and it retires at the end of battle or something like that. So it's a nifty little card for Zorga, but just playing it at 1 copy because, of course, you can just recur it. We got ourselves another Zorga list, somewhat more of the same. I feel like the Misty Habitat doesn't really work the best with this deck anymore because of the fact that you don't really want to call this from Misty Habitat and stuff like Philander, and I believe this is also from your hand that you use this skill, but if you have something like the Headhunter, kind of makes sense to use that. This order is pretty cool. It allows you to just give 5k to anything that's called from drop. So ideally you want to bind this and always kind of ping that, so always give your board plus 5k. Combines really well with this. That gives your front row 5k, so if you call your Prison Dragons or whatever the case may be from drop, they get 5k from this, and then this gives your front row 5k as well, so it just gives everything 10k, so it kind of works similar to the mask that instantly gave everything 10k on Alchemagic. So you can stack a bunch of those buffs. This is not running the Prison Dragons. Then we'll jump over to Lyrical really quickly here with Fennel. This is a pretty typical Fennel list. I'm a bit shocked that we're not seeing the Order Cycler, because the Order Cycler goes insane in Fennel. Instead we're seeing, I think this is the one that gets like 5k for every 3 Trick or Treat you have in your drop. The Order Cycler is insane because it just says, you know, discard a card to take an order, put it into your drop, and at the end of the turn you can play it from your drop, and then it goes on to the bottom of the deck. so it just very easily fills up your drop and gets you access to these things. You can do a lot of interesting things, but oh well. And then really quickly, we just have the 2 MyGo list. I don't know what these cards do per se, but I just know that it's kind of just 4 of all the cards, and you really just have a choice of like the Regalius piece, the Popo is being played here, and also the order that you want to play, because it's just whatever you can for this, you know, sub-nation, I guess, or sub-clan. And this is something that we're going to be seeing in English, because it's actually confirmed for Divine Set 1. And this kind of, you know, was a really strong deck in Japan. It was a storm when it came out. People wanted this banned because it was considered tier 0 for like 1 weekend, because it just had so many showings. So I'm really excited to see how this turns out, especially taking people like partially myself by surprise, who just kind of ignored it, since it's kind of like, well, it's a collab, probably not come to English, why even bother? So keep an eye out for this deck. But that does it for taking a look at week 1 of Divines Set 2. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what kind of builds you're messing around with. I'm personally really looking forward to trying out Bladmire and Zorga a bit, but I think the most that I want to get, unfortunately, is Rotovisor and Flame G's. The girls, I really like those 2 decks, even though they're not really that good. But I also want to get Gryandra, which we did not see here at all. I think that's a really nice, fun deck, as well as the Virginia, the Varjuria. Really like both of those decks. Didn't see any of that here. But in any case, till next time, take care of yourselves and each other, play Vanguard, and have yourselves a damn good one.